Welcome back. Today we are diving into one of the strangest and most dangerous alternate timelines the Clone Wars can possibly produce. What if Maul reached Mortis, killed the Sun, and somehow took the Sun's power for himself? This is not simply a story where Maul becomes stronger and goes looking for Obi-Wan Kenobi with a few new abilities. Mortis is tied to the balance of the Force itself, and the Sun is not an ordinary Sith Lord waiting to be defeated by a better duelist. He is one of the three beings who embody the conflict Anakin Skywalker has been prophesied to resolve. If Maul replaces that being, then the entire spiritual structure beneath the Clone Wars changes before Darth Sidious has even completed his plan. The war between the Republic and the Separatists would still matter, but it would suddenly become the surface of a much larger catastrophe, because for the first time, Sidious would be forced to confront a darkness he did not create, cannot control, and may not even understand. To make this scenario work while remaining as close to Clone Wars canon as possible, we have to begin with an important detail about Maul's condition at the time of the Mortis arc, when Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka are drawn into the strange monolith and encounter the Father, the Daughter, and the Son. Maul has not yet returned to galactic affairs. Savage Opress has only recently been created and trained, and Maul is still stranded on Lotho Minor, where he has spent years surviving through hatred, pain, vermin, and a grotesque set of mechanical spider legs. The calculating crime lord, who will later build the Shadow Collective, does not exist yet. The man on Lotho Minor is shattered, half feral, and obsessed with fragments of memory, especially the image of Obi-Wan Kenobi. That makes his arrival on Mortis harder to explain through normal travel, but Mortis has never behaved like a normal planet. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka are pulled there by a massive monolith broadcasting an ancient distress signal, experience events that seem to span days, and then return to normal space, apparently at the same moment they vanished. If anything in the Clone Wars can reach across ordinary distance and pluck a broken Force user from a junk world, Mortis is exactly the place where it could happen. So our point of divergence begins not with Maul finding a star chart, but with Mortis finding Maul. The Son has already become restless. The Father is weakening and wants Anakin to remain behind as his successor, because he believes the Chosen One is uniquely capable of controlling both his children. Anakin refuses, and the Son begins looking for another path to freedom. In canon, he reaches directly into Anakin's fear, and eventually shows him a vision of Darth Vader, hoping to turn the Chosen One into an ally. In this timeline, however, that same search through the dark side brushes against something far away in the Outer Rim, a consciousness that has survived for a decade on almost nothing except rage. Maul is not balanced, he is not disciplined, he is not even fully sane. But he is extraordinarily difficult to kill, and the hatred sustaining him is so concentrated that it is almost a beacon. The Son feels that hatred across the strange boundaries surrounding Mortis, and in his arrogance, he decides it may be useful. On Lotho Minor, Maul experiences the first clear vision he has had in years. The garbage caves disappear. The screeching machinery and falling scrap vanish beneath a sudden silence, and in that silence, he sees a red landscape, a black tower, and the face of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He hears a voice promising revenge. For the broken Maul, nothing else is required. He does not understand Mortis, does not know who is speaking, and does not need to. His whole existence has collapsed into the idea that Kenobi lives while he suffers, so when the voice tells him to follow, he gives himself to it completely. Mortis answers. A storm of Force energy tears through the cavern, the rusted spider legs scrape against stone, and Maul disappears from Lotho Minor before Savage ever reaches him. To the rest of the galaxy, nothing remarkable has happened. To the balance of the Force, a mortal vessel made almost entirely of hatred has just been placed beside the living embodiment of the dark side. The Son's mistake is assuming that Maul can be used in the same way Ahsoka or Anakin can be used. He sees a ruined Sith apprentice and imagines a servant. Maul sees an opportunity only in the most primitive sense. At first he follows the voice, but the moment he arrives on Mortis, the environment begins affecting him. The Force on Mortis is so concentrated that Anakin can bring both the Son and Daughter to their knees when the Father tests him. For Maul, whose sanity is already held together by dark side fury, the effect is closer to intoxication. every grievance becomes vivid. He sees Naboo again. He hears Qui-Gon's blade. He feels Obi-Wan cutting through his body. He relives the fall, the endless descent, the years alone, and the final abandonment by the Master who never came for him. But mixed into those memories is something new: awareness. The presence of the sun does not calm Maul's madness. It gives his hatred shape. For the first time since Naboo, Maul understands that he was not merely defeated by Kenobi. He was discarded by Sidious. This is where the timing of the Mortis trilogy becomes essential. The best moment for Maul to intervene is during the events surrounding the Altar of Mortis, after the son has taken Ahsoka and corrupted her, but before the daughter has sacrificed herself. Obi-Wan has been shown the Dagger of Mortis, a weapon capable of killing one of the Force wielders. The son wants it because he intends to kill the father and steal his power. In canon, the son obtains the dagger, strikes at the father, and the daughter steps between them, taking the fatal blow. In our timeline, the son brings Maul close because he intends to unleash him on Obi-Wan. He does not realize that simply placing Maul and Kenobi in the same space restores enough of Maul's mind to make him dangerous. The instant Maul recognizes Obi-Wan, years of incoherent fury focus into one purpose. He remembers who he is. He remembers the Sith. And most importantly, he remembers the most basic lesson Darth Sidious ever taught him. Power belongs to the one strong enough to seize it. Obi-Wan is horrified not only because Maul is alive, but because the thing confronting him barely resembles the warrior he killed on Naboo. This Maul crawls on towering mechanical limbs and speaks through broken bursts of recognition. Yet Mortis is already changing him. He can feel the sun's power flowing around everything, and he can feel the dagger in the sun's hand as something fundamentally different from a lightsaber. The weapon is not simply sharp. It is a rule made physical, one of the few objects in this impossible realm capable of making these apparently immortal beings die. Maul does not know its history, but he does not need to understand it intellectually. The dark side tells him what it can do. When the son turns toward the father and prepares to end his rule, Maul moves. No normal version of Maul should be fast enough to surprise the son. That is important, because turning this into a conventional duel would immediately break the logic of Mortis. The sun can transform, teleport, manipulate minds, hurl enormous objects, and contend with beings beyond ordinary Jedi and Sith. Maul wins only because the sun is arrogant, distracted, and operating in a realm where symbolic choices matter as much as physical strength. The son has spent the entire crisis looking past mortals. He sees Anakin as a prophesied key, Ahsoka as leverage, Obi-Wan as an inconvenience, and Maul as a weapon. He never considers that the weapon could turn around. As he raises the dagger against his father, Maul launches himself from the shadows, uses the Force with a clarity he has not possessed in years, catches the sun's wrist, and drives the Mortis blade back into the being who thought himself untouchable. The sun's death is immediate, but it is not quiet. In canon, the deaths of the ones restore a kind of balance to Mortis, because all three are ultimately removed from the equation. Here only the dark incarnation dies, while the power associated with him has nowhere to go. This is the single supernatural change our scenario requires beyond canon. Instead of dissipating back into the Force, the sun's dark essence seeks a vessel, and standing over him is perhaps the worst vessel imaginable. Maul has spent more than 10 years proving that his body can survive because his hatred refuses to release it. The dark side has already been the glue holding his life together. When the sun dies, that vast reservoir of energy pours into the nearest consciousness capable of embracing it without hesitation. Maul does not resist for even a second. The transformation is violent enough to change Mortis around him. His scavenged legs twist and collapse under currents of black energy before reforming into something stronger, no longer merely machinery bolted to ruined flesh, but a shape held together as much by the Force as by metal. The tattoos across his body seem to move beneath the red light. His eyes burn brighter than ordinary Sith yellow. The madness that once scattered his thoughts does not disappear. It becomes organized around a terrible new certainty. Maul can feel the entire realm. He can sense the daughter's light like a wound in the distance, the father's fading strength like a barrier waiting to be broken, Anakin's immense unrealized potential, Ahsoka's corrupted fear, and Obi-Wan's shock. He can also feel something beyond Mortis, faint but unmistakable. Darth Sidious. The master who abandoned him is alive, powerful, hidden somewhere in a galaxy that suddenly feels very small. For the first time in his life, Maul no longer wants Sidious to acknowledge him. He wants Sidious to understand that he made a mistake. That change in motivation is what makes this version of Maul more dangerous than the son himself. The son wanted freedom from Mortis, but he also wanted Anakin as an ally and remained trapped inside the ancient family conflict with the father and daughter. Maul has no such cosmic upbringing. He does not think in terms of maintaining a metaphysical order. He thinks like an abused Sith weapon who has just discovered that the cage door is open. His first instinct is revenge, his second is domination, and his third is making everyone who ever controlled him feel powerless. The son's strength has not replaced Maul's personality. It has amplified it beyond any scale the galaxy is prepared to survive. The father understands the disaster before anyone else. His entire existence on Mortis has been defined by controlling two extremes that are stronger when allowed to act without restraint. He did not merely imprison the sun because the sun was evil. He contained the sun because the dark side, embodied without limitation, would consume everything around it. Now that power is no longer inside a being who understands the rules of Mortis. It is inside a mortal whose identity was built by Sidious around hatred, obedience, humiliation, and revenge. The father reaches toward Maul and attempts to command the energy back into balance, but Maul responds with an instinct the father has never had to confront from his children. He does not struggle for independence in the abstract. He attacks the source of authority itself. Anakin immediately realizes something has changed beyond the simple death of an enemy. Earlier, the father's test proved that Anakin could force both son and daughter into submission at the same time. That moment is one of the clearest demonstrations of why the father believes he is the chosen one. But Maul is no longer simply occupying the son's position. The dark power is being driven through a mortal will that has spent years refusing death. When Anakin reaches out to restrain him, Maul is forced backward for a moment, and that moment matters. The chosen one can still affect him. The prophecy has not suddenly become meaningless, but the effort required is enormous, and Anakin is trying to contain a force that no longer behaves according to the relationship the father spent ages maintaining. The daughter moves to protect her father, and this is where the alternate timeline avoids her immediate canon death. Because Maul intercepted the son before the dagger could strike, the daughter never throws herself in front of that blade. Ahsoka is still in terrible condition from the son's corruption, but the daughter remains alive and therefore retains the power she would have spent in her final moments restoring Ahsoka. Obi-Wan tries to reach the Padawan while Anakin confronts Maul, and the daughter uses part of her energy to draw the son's poison out of Ahsoka. She succeeds, but the process weakens her. The difference is that she survives it. For a few minutes, this seems like a possible advantage. Mortis still has its embodiment of light. The father still lives, and Anakin is still present. If any combination can stop Maul before the transferred power settles completely into him, it is this one. The father tries a different approach. He speaks to Maul, not as a Sith and not as a servant of the sun, but as someone who has been consumed by imbalance for almost his entire life. He tells him that the power he has taken cannot be possessed in the way he imagines. It is not a throne or a title. It is part of a relationship that touches the Force far beyond Mortis, and if Maul continues to feed it with his own hatred, he will turn the realm into an open wound. Under almost any other circumstances, this warning might at least make a rational Darksider cautious. Maul hears only another powerful father figure telling him that he is too small to hold what he has taken. He has lived that story before. Sidious decided Maul was disposable. The Jedi decided he was dead. The galaxy forgot him. Now the father is telling him that cosmic power does not belong to him either, and Maul's answer is the same answer that will define everything from this point forward. No one will take anything from him again. He attacks the father directly. The daughter intercepts, and the first true clash between light and this new incarnation of darkness tears across Mortis. The daughter is not weak. Canon makes clear that she is the son's counterpoint, and the father has spent ages preventing either child from dominating the other. But Maul brings an additional factor the son never possessed, an intimate knowledge of physical combat. The ones often wield the Force on a mythic scale, while Maul has been trained to read footwork, exploit hesitation, feint, and kill. His new abilities are clumsy, but his instincts are not. He allows the daughter to believe she is pushing him backward, draws her away from the father, and then stops fighting her power directly. Instead, he vanishes through the shadows and reappears beside the altar where the dagger fell. Obi-Wan sees what he is doing and moves first. He has already held the Mortis dagger and knows what it can do. He launches himself toward it as Maul reaches out, and for one surreal instant their old conflict returns in a form neither could have imagined. Obi-Wan is no longer the Padawan hanging in a reactor shaft, and Maul is no longer the Sith assassin who killed Qui-Gon. Yet the emotional geometry is identical. Maul sees Kenobi between him and the thing he wants. Obi-Wan sees Maul threatening someone he is sworn to protect. Their blades meet when Maul tears a fallen weapon from the ground and ignites it with borrowed energy, creating something that behaves less like a conventional lightsaber and more like a projection of the dark side. Obi-Wan can barely hold the first strike. This is the moment Maul could kill Obi-Wan, but he does not. That choice tells us what cosmic power has done to him psychologically. The broken creature on Lotho Minor wanted revenge in the simplest possible form. He wanted Kenobi dead. The restored Maul of later seasons becomes crueler and more sophisticated, learning that suffering can hurt Obi-Wan more deeply than death. Here he reaches that realization instantly because he can feel Obi-Wan's fear, guilt, hope, and attachments with terrifying clarity. Killing Kenobi would end the relationship. Breaking him would allow Maul to possess it. He hurls Obi-Wan aside, pins him against stone without touching him, and forces him to watch as he turns back toward the father. The father now understands that the dagger cannot remain in play. In canon, he ultimately uses it on himself, sacrificing his life so the son can be made vulnerable, and Anakin can kill him. In this timeline, that exact plan no longer works, because the son's power is already inside Maul. Still, the father reaches the same conclusion about sacrifice. As long as he remains alive, Maul will try to take his power as well. The son wanted that power because combining it with his own might have allowed him to escape Mortis entirely. Maul does not yet understand this, but the father knows he will, so he makes the only move that can deny Maul a complete victory. He takes the dagger and turns it on himself. Anakin shouts for him to stop, but the father drives the blade into his own body. The effect is catastrophic. In canon, the father's death helps strip the son of his advantage and creates the opening Anakin needs. Here the connection is different. Maul already carries the son's essence, and the father's death removes the stabilizing presence that has kept Mortis balanced for ages. Instead of weakening Maul enough to make him mortal, it removes the last structure containing what he has become. The sky above Mortis tears open. Day and night begin flickering across the landscape in seconds. Forests bloom and rot almost instantly. Stone towers fracture and rebuild in different shapes. The realm is not simply turning dark, it is losing coherence. The daughter feels the change most deeply. Her brother is dead. Her father is dying. And the power that should oppose her has been twisted into a mortal consciousness that does not understand restraint. She reaches for the father, but there is no final instruction that can repair what has happened. He tells Anakin that balance now depends on a choice the Chosen One has not yet made. He warns that Mortis can no longer hold the darkness safely. Then he dies, and the daughter becomes the only original Force wielder left alive. That leaves Anakin in a position more terrible than the test in Overlords. The father originally asked him to stay on Mortis and take his place, maintaining balance between the son and daughter. Anakin refused because doing so meant abandoning everything in his life. Now there is no father's place to inherit in the same way. There is only a collapsing realm, a weakened daughter, and Maul carrying a cosmic darkness that wants out. Anakin could theoretically remain and try to contain him, but there is no guarantee he can do it, and Mortis itself may not survive long enough for containment to matter. At the same time, allowing Maul to return to the galaxy means releasing something far worse than a Sith Lord into the middle of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka regains consciousness just as the crisis reaches this point. She remembers fragments of her corruption under the sun, attacking Anakin, giving herself to anger, feeling power as if it were the only thing that mattered. Now she looks at Maul and senses that same darkness magnified beyond recognition. For Ahsoka, this becomes an early glimpse of a lesson that will define her later life in canon. Darkness is not merely an enemy standing across a battlefield. It can move through people, exploit pain, and turn relationships into weapons. She does not yet know Maul's history, but she can see that whatever he was before Mortis, the power inside him is feeding on injuries that were already there. Obi-Wan knows more. Even before Maul's canonical return, Obi-Wan carries the memory of Naboo and Qui-Gon's death. Seeing Maul alive would be shocking enough. Seeing him transformed into something that can overpower the Father's realm forces Obi-Wan into a kind of helplessness he almost never experiences during the Clone Wars. He cannot negotiate with this problem through politics, cannot defeat it with superior swordsmanship, and cannot call a fleet. Worse, Maul can feel exactly where to hurt him. He projects an image of Qui-Gon standing beside the dying father. He recreates the reactor chamber on Naboo around Obi-Wan. He forces the Jedi Master to watch his younger self fail again and again, each vision ending with Qui-Gon falling. This is what it means for Maul to break Obi-Wan rather than simply kill him. Obi-Wan's greatest strength throughout the Clone Wars is his ability to suffer without surrendering his principles. He loses Qui-Gon, Satine, friends, soldiers, and eventually almost the entire Jedi Order. Yet he repeatedly refuses the hatred Maul wants from him. Cosmic Maul therefore attacks the foundation of that resilience. He does not merely show Obi-Wan loss. He creates the sensation that every loss happened because Obi-Wan survived. Qui-Gon dies and Kenobi lives. Maul survives because Kenobi failed to sense it. Countless future victims appear in visions as consequences of that failure. The point is not whether these visions are objectively true. The Son used possible futures and emotional truths as weapons, and Maul now learns to do the same. For several moments, Obi-Wan cannot move. His lightsaber remains in his hand, but the calm that normally separates him from Maul's rage begins to crack. That is the victory Maul wants. He could close his fist and end Kenobi's life. Instead, he leans close enough for Obi-Wan to see the face beneath the new darkness, and tells him that death would be mercy. Then Maul turns away. He wants Obi-Wan alive long enough to understand what the galaxy becomes, because he failed to finish the job on Naboo. Anakin responds exactly as Maul expects. The sight of Obi-Wan being psychologically tortured ignites his anger, and anger is the one language the power inside Maul understands perfectly. Anakin attacks with the same raw intensity that allowed him to dominate the son and daughter during the father's test. For a moment, the entire realm seems to answer him. The ground lifts. Great stones tear free. Maul is driven backward, and the daughter senses a possibility that the Chosen One can still force the stolen darkness into submission. But Anakin's method is the problem. He is trying to beat darkness by becoming angrier than it is. Maul recognizes that immediately, because it is what Sidious taught him to do all his life. He stops resisting Anakin's rage and begins feeding it. Every strike Skywalker throws makes the shadows around Maul stronger. Every fear for Obi-Wan and Ahsoka gives Maul another emotional current to pull. Maul shows Anakin flashes of Padme dying, not because he yet knows the exact future the Son revealed in canon, but because the inherited power can reach into the fear already buried inside Anakin. He shows him the Jedi Council turning away. He shows Obi-Wan dead at Maul's feet. He shows Ahsoka consumed by darkness again. Anakin fights harder, and the harder he fights, the more he begins resembling the future he is desperate to avoid. The daughter intervenes before the spiral becomes irreversible. She surrounds Anakin in light and forces him to feel Ahsoka and Obi-Wan as they actually are, rather than as Maul's visions present them. The effect is enough to break his momentum. It also costs the daughter more of her diminishing strength. With the father dead and the son's essence displaced, she has no counterpart through which balance can be mediated. Every act of opposition becomes direct. Light and dark are no longer being held in tension by the father. They are colliding without a buffer, and Mortis pays the price. This is where the realm begins its true decay. Rivers turn black, then evaporate. The enormous plants that once bloomed in daylight become brittle shapes under a permanent red dusk. The monastery and altar shift in and out of existence. The boundary between physical place and vision becomes almost impossible to distinguish. The daughter tells the Jedi that Mortis is a fulcrum connected to the larger force, and that if the imbalance is allowed to remain here, it will not stay here. The darkness inside Maul is searching for an exit. If he finds one, he will carry the wound with him. Maul, meanwhile, discovers the thing the son wanted most, the path out. When the father dies, Maul feels the barrier around Mortis weaken. He can sense ordinary space beyond the realm, and with it, billions upon billions of lives, fears, conflicts, and hatreds. To the son, escape meant freedom. To Maul, it feels like an entire galaxy waiting to be made answer for his suffering. Somewhere among those lives is Kenobi's Republic. Somewhere is the Jedi Order, and somewhere is Darth Sidious. The broken man who once survived in a garbage pit suddenly understands that he does not have to choose one object of revenge. He can reach all of them. The daughter tries to seal the opening before he can use it. Maul attacks her with everything he has learned, and this time the confrontation is not close. She is weakened from restoring Ahsoka, devastated by the deaths of her family, and fighting in a realm increasingly saturated by the stolen dark essence. Maul does not kill her immediately, because some instinct tells him that completely extinguishing the light may have consequences even he cannot predict. Instead, he binds her to Mortis. He wraps the ruins of the realm around her presence and uses her as an anchor, forcing the last embodiment of light to remain behind while he opens a path into the physical galaxy. The escape happens with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka still present. Maul could leave them to die with Mortis, but revenge again changes his decision. He wants witnesses. He wants the Jedi to know what has been released, and he wants Sidious to hear about it through people he trusts. So when the monolith opens, Maul throws all 3 Jedi through the breach ahead of him. Their ship reappears in the Kerlithium system at almost the exact instant it disappeared, just as it does in canon, but this time, something else emerges from the monolith. A black shape forms against the stars, wrapped in energy that instruments cannot properly measure. Maul has returned to the galaxy. The first consequence is not a battle. It is a sensation felt by every sufficiently attuned, force-sensitive at once. Yoda stops in the Jedi Temple and nearly falls. Mace Windu feels as if a pressure that has already clouded the Jedi's vision suddenly becomes a storm. Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Shaak Ti, and other Jedi across the front experience the same moment of disorientation. Count Dooku feels it on the Separatist side, and initially believes Sidious has unleashed some hidden Sith ritual. Mother Talzin feels something even stranger, a familiar thread connected to the son of Dathomir she thought lost, now carrying a presence so vast that even her magics cannot read it clearly. Savage Opress feels his brother for the first time, not as a distant blood connection, but as a roar in the Force. And then there is Sidious. Of everyone in the galaxy, Palpatine understands the dark side best in practical terms. He has spent years deepening the imbalance, concealing himself in the center of the Republic, manipulating the Jedi through a war he controls on both sides, and turning Anakin's fear into a pathway toward Sith apprenticeship. His plan depends not merely on power, but on precision. The Jedi must remain blind enough to miss him, confident enough to keep fighting, exhausted enough to be vulnerable, and politically compromised enough that their destruction can be accepted. Maul's arrival is the opposite of precision. It is dark side power, screaming openly across the Force. Maul recognizes him instantly. All the confusion of Lothal Minor disappears in the presence of his former master. The son's inherited perception lets him feel the architecture of Sidious's deception. Not every detail, not names and passwords magically appearing in his mind, but the shape of it. He senses a dark presence wrapped around Coruscant. He senses Dooku connected to that presence. He senses the war as 2 rivers deliberately redirected by one hidden hand. And because Maul was once part of Sidious's original plan, the realization comes with personal clarity. Sidious did not simply abandon him because Naboo went wrong. Sidious replaced him. The entire future of the Clone Wars changes at that moment. Maul has not yet conquered Mandalore, has not founded the Shadow Collective, and has not killed Satine. Savage has not restored him. Yet he now possesses something far more dangerous than all of those later achievements combined, enough power to challenge Sidious directly, and enough memory of Sith doctrine to understand that there can be no stable galaxy while both of them exist. Sidious arrives at the same conclusion. The grand plan can survive Jedi victories, separatist failures, political scandals, and even the loss of individual Sith agents. It cannot survive a cosmic dark side entity wearing the face of Darth Maul and announcing itself to every force sensitive in the galaxy. The war therefore gains a hidden priority before most soldiers even know anything happened. Sidious orders Dooku to investigate the disturbance without explaining its true nature. The Jedi Council calls Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka back to Coruscant immediately. The three return with a story that sounds impossible, even by Jedi standards. The father is dead, the son is dead, the daughter is trapped, Mortis is collapsing, and Maul, the Sith Lord Obi-Wan believed he killed more than a decade earlier, has somehow taken the son's power and escaped. Obi-Wan's testimony changes the room. The Council can accept that Mortis contained beings of extraordinary power because Yoda is sensitive to mysteries beyond conventional Jedi knowledge. But Maul's survival is a tangible threat with history attached to it. Anakin insists that ordinary forces will not be enough. Ahsoka describes how easily Maul manipulated emotion, and how his strength seemed to grow when Anakin fought in anger. Obi-Wan says less than either of them, and that silence worries Yoda. Maul did not physically defeat Kenobi in the way he could have. He left him carrying visions designed to erode his confidence, and for the first time, Obi-Wan has to admit that this enemy knows how to make his greatest strength, his endurance, feel like guilt. The Council's first instinct is containment. They cannot tell the Senate that a dead Sith Lord has returned from a metaphysical realm, carrying the power of a dark side god. They barely understand the event themselves, but secrecy creates exactly the kind of environment Maul can exploit. Sidious also wants the matter contained, though for opposite reasons. If Maul begins exposing Sith knowledge publicly, Palpatine's entire political position could become vulnerable, so for a brief period, the Jedi and Sidious independently pursue the same goal: find Maul before the galaxy understands what he is. They are already too late. Maul's first destination is not Coruscant, it is Dathomir. Dathomir is the logical place, because even in his madness, Maul retains buried associations with home, blood, and Mother Talzin. The Night Sister Matriarch is one of the few beings in the galaxy who might look at what has happened to him, and understand that brute strength is not the only issue. Her magic already operates in ways the Jedi and Sith do not fully comprehend. She knows that Maul's life has been sustained by unnatural hatred, and she knows Savage is bound to her plans. When Maul arrives over Dathomir without a ship, wrapped in a distortion that makes the sky itself seem bruised, Talzin realizes the son she once expected Savage to retrieve has returned by a route no vision showed her. Their reunion is not warm. Talzin has always treated family, magic, and strategy as intertwined, while Maul's relationship with her is shaped by having been taken into Sidious's possession as a child. In canon, she restores his sanity and gives him new mechanical legs, helping transform the broken creature Savage finds into the calculating warrior who can challenge the underworld. Here there is less physical work to do, because Mortis has already remade him, but his mind still needs an anchor. Talzin gives him one by speaking his name, his history, and his bloodline. She reminds him of Dathomir, of the Night Brothers, and of Savage. She does not give him back his identity, so much as help him choose which pieces of it he wants to keep. Maul keeps the title. That matters. Darth Sidious would say Maul has no right to call himself Darth after being replaced, and later Maul himself will move beyond conventional Sith identity. But at this moment, the title is a theft he enjoys. Sidious made him Darth Maul, then decided that name no longer mattered when the apprentice fell. By continuing to use it, Maul is effectively refusing his master the right to determine when his existence begins and ends. At the same time, he no longer accepts the rule of two as a law above him. The Son's power has shown him something older and larger than the Sith Order. To Maul, the Sith become what every other organization becomes: a structure that can be used until it is no longer useful. Savage arrives on Dathomir expecting Talzin to send him searching for a lost brother. Instead, he finds Maul already there. In canon, Savage's compassion and persistence are crucial, because he is the one who reaches the mad creature on Lotho Minor and physically brings him home. That shared ordeal forms the emotional core of their relationship. In this timeline, it never happens, and the difference makes their bond more unequal from the beginning. Savage does not rescue Maul. He meets a brother who already feels like a supernatural ruler. Maul senses Savage's strength, the Night Sister alterations in his body, and the resentment created by Dooku's abuse. He also senses something he desperately wants after years of abandonment: loyalty that is based on blood rather than Sidious's approval. Maul names Savage his brother, and then, almost immediately, his apprentice. The old Sith hierarchy remains embedded too deeply in him to disappear overnight. Savage is powerful enough to be useful, but not powerful enough to threaten him, and Maul likes the symbolism of replacing Sidious's line with his own. Talzin recognizes the danger in this. Cosmic power has not freed Maul from the patterns Sidious carved into him. It has merely given him the ability to impose those patterns on everyone else. She tries to counsel patience, telling him that his enemy controls armies, governments, intelligence networks, and the public story of the Clone Wars. Maul listens, which surprises her because part of his later genius in canon is precisely his ability to turn underworld politics into a weapon. The difference is that now he sees politics as preparation for something much larger. His first campaign is therefore not random destruction, it is a demonstration. Maul chooses a separatist world near key Outer Rim routes and attacks a droid occupation force alone. He does this for 3 reasons. First, he wants to learn the limits of his power outside Mortis. Second, he wants Dooku to carry the message back to Sidious. Third, he wants every criminal organization watching the war to understand that the balance of power has changed. A tactical droid receives reports of a single attacker and responds with the usual machine logic: surround, suppress, escalate. The battle lasts minutes. Maul does not simply throw battle droids around one at a time. He reaches into the structure of the battlefield. Armored columns lift from the ground and collide. Droid starfighters lose control, as if space around them has changed direction. Communications fail because Maul floods the area with interference that technicians cannot identify. When a line of B-1 units fires, their bolts bend away from him, not because Maul is carefully deflecting each shot, but because the local environment seems unwilling to let the weapons touch him. The more the army attacks, the more violently he answers. Dooku receives the combat recordings and immediately understands that the attacker is not a Jedi. The silhouette is impossible to mistake once Maul's face appears. Dooku knows who Darth Maul was because Sidious's previous apprentice is part of Sith history, even if Sidious rarely speaks of him with anything resembling sentiment. What Dooku cannot understand is the power. He has fought Yoda, trained under him, and become one of the greatest duelists in the galaxy. He knows what elite Force users look like. Maul's attack resembles none of them. When Dooku reports to Sidious, Palpatine does not pretend ignorance for long. He orders Dooku not to engage Maul personally. That instruction alone tells Dooku how serious the situation is. Sidious is not a master who usually fears losing his apprentice. Replacement is built into Sith logic. If he is keeping Dooku away from Maul, it is because he believes contact could compromise something larger. Dooku begins to wonder whether Maul knows secrets Sidious has never shared with him, and that suspicion introduces a fracture into the Sith partnership years earlier than canon. The Jedi investigate the ruined Separatist position and find almost no conventional evidence. Anakin wants to pursue Maul immediately, partly because he feels responsible for failing to stop him on Mortis. Obi-Wan argues that this is exactly what Maul wants. Ahsoka agrees with Obi-Wan more than Anakin expects. She remembers what happened when Anakin attacked Maul in anger. The darkness seemed to answer anger with more strength. If they chase him emotionally, they are entering the fight on his terms. This creates an early philosophical divide between Master and Padawan. Anakin sees action as responsibility. Ahsoka has just experienced possession by the Sun, and now sees emotional control as survival. Maul uses that distraction to build the political foundation the prompt requires. He turns toward Mandalore earlier than he does in canon. At this stage, Duchess Satine Kryze still rules a neutral Mandalore committed to pacifism, while Pre Vizsla's Death Watch operates as an extremist movement determined to restore the planet's warrior traditions. In canon, Maul and Savage eventually encounter Death Watch after their own campaign of revenge has already begun, and the Alliance gives Maul access to Mandalorian soldiers while giving Vizsla access to criminal muscle. Here Maul approaches Vizsla deliberately because Mortis has taught him one crucial lesson: power still needs a place to stand. A cosmic dark side being floating from battlefield to battlefield could terrify the galaxy, but terror alone does not create supply lines, shipyards, intelligence, prisons, propaganda, or legitimacy. Maul learned the basics of statecraft from Sidious even before he ever ruled anything himself. Sidious taught him that visible authority and real authority do not have to be the same. Mandalore is ideal because its neutrality limits immediate Republic intervention. Its martial history gives Maul access to elite warriors, and Deathwatch already has a grievance he can weaponize. Pre Vizsla reacts differently to this Maul than he does to the one he meets in canon. There, Vizsla believes he is using Maul and Savage as temporary tools. Here he has already seen recordings of Maul erasing droid battalions. He knows he cannot casually betray this ally. Maul nevertheless allows him to believe that Mandalore will remain Mandalorian. He tells Vizsla he wants only sanctuary and a military partnership. He even promises that Satine will be removed by Mandalorian hands rather than by foreign occupation, a promise crafted to flatter Deathwatch's ideology. The campaign against Satine therefore unfolds faster and with less need for elaborate criminal theater. In canon, the Shadow Collective stages attacks so Deathwatch can publicly defeat the criminals and appear to save Mandalore, turning popular fear into support for Vizsla. Cosmic Maul can create the crisis by attacking infrastructure through proxies while remaining unseen, but he still understands the value of letting Mandalorians believe they chose their liberators. Deathwatch emerges as the force capable of restoring security. Satine is arrested. Vizsla takes power. The familiar betrayal still comes, because it is who Vizsla is. He cannot accept being subordinate on his own world, and Mandalorian tradition gives him a path he thinks he can control. He challenges Maul for leadership. In canon, that duel is one of Maul's most important political victories, because he defeats Vizsla without using the Force as a shortcut, claims the Darksaber, and uses Deathwatch's own warrior code to justify his rule. In this timeline, Maul deliberately recreates that logic. He does not need to. He could crush Vizsla without moving. But he understands that domination is more durable when the defeated culture provides the language for its own submission. So Maul fights with a blade. He suppresses most of the sun's power, meets Vizsla in front of Deathwatch, and wins through skill. The duel is shorter than canon because Mortis has repaired Maul's body beyond even Talzin's later reconstruction, but it is recognizable as a warrior's contest. Maul takes the Darksaber and executes Vizsla. Then he looks at the assembled Mandalorians and does something more dangerous than a supernatural display. He tells them their own rules have chosen him. Bo-Katan Kryze refuses. That remains one of the strongest canon anchors in the scenario. Her loyalty to Deathwatch never extends to accepting an outsider as ruler of Mandalore, especially the outsider who kills Vizsla. She takes the Night Owls and those who agree with her into rebellion. Maul allows them to escape. Part of him wants resistance because resistance creates examples. Another part remembers Obi-Wan and understands that enemies who care about something can be used to draw other enemies into reach. Satine remains alive for the moment, and that is deliberate. Canon Maul eventually kills her in front of Obi-Wan as the centerpiece of his revenge. This Maul has already discovered on Mortis how powerful emotional torture can be. He now holds Satine as both a political hostage and a weapon specifically designed for Kenobi. Bo-Katan knows what that means and sends desperate messages beyond Mandalore. The Republic still hesitates because Mandalore is officially neutral, and the Chancellor publicly argues that intervention could transform a political crisis into occupation. Behind closed doors, Sidious has an entirely different reason for caution. He does not want the Jedi rushing into Maul's fortress until he has a plan for killing him. Maul then builds the criminal empire he would have assembled later, but he does it from a vastly stronger position. Black Sun can be coerced, the Pike Syndicate can be offered protection and threatened with annihilation. Hutt influence matters because their territories, shipping networks, and wealth extend across enormous sections of the Outer Rim. Yet Maul no longer needs to physically appear before every crime lord and prove himself through conventional violence. His destruction of separatist forces and seizure of Mandalore already function as advertisements. Syndicates begin sending representatives because neutrality toward Maul looks less safe every week. The result resembles the Shadow Collective in structure, but not in spirit. Canon Maul needs the syndicates because their money, soldiers, ships, and contacts allow him to manufacture political crises. Cosmic Maul uses them as a nervous system. The Pikes move spice and information. Black Sun moves weapons and assassins. Hutt networks offer routes that cross borders both Republic and Separatist authorities struggle to police. Mandalore provides a capital, elite warriors, and advanced technology. Death Watch provides ideological soldiers who can convince themselves they are rebuilding Mandalorian greatness rather than serving a dark side ruler. Crimson Dawn should not be treated as a fully established equal member at this early point in Clone Wars chronology. In later canon, Maul will become associated with Crimson Dawn as part of his surviving criminal empire. But at the moment of Mortis, the safest interpretation is that the network which could eventually become or incorporate Crimson Dawn has not yet reached the form we see later. In this alternate timeline, however, Maul has every reason to create a more centralized organization earlier. He begins pulling trusted agents from multiple syndicates into a personal structure that answers to him rather than to their original bosses. Over time, that inner network could plausibly take the Crimson Dawn name or function. But the important point is that Maul is not magically summoning a later institution years ahead of schedule. He is accelerating the conditions that will create it. Within months, the Clone Wars is no longer truly a two-sided conflict. The Republic still fights the Confederacy, and Sidious still controls both at the top, but Maul's territory cuts across the underworld beneath them. A Separatist offensive might discover that its fuel suppliers have disappeared because the Pikes changed allegiance. A Republic garrison might find local officials bribed by Black Sun. Hutt routes can redirect material away from either side. Mandalorian raiders strike where formal armies are weakest. Then, when resistance becomes inconvenient, Maul personally appears and turns a conventional battle into a massacre. This is where Sidious's grand plan begins to deform. The original plan works because the war is engineered to produce exhaustion while keeping every major outcome inside Sidious's acceptable range. The Republic can win battles because Sidious also controls the political consequences of victory. The Separatists can threaten Coruscant because Sidious controls Dooku and Grievous. Maul creates outcomes that do not belong to either script. Every system that defects to Maul is a system Sidious has not scheduled. Every criminal route Maul captures is a variable Dooku cannot reliably manipulate. Every public story about a supernatural ruler on Mandalore threatens to make the Jedi look in directions Palpatine would rather they ignore. Sidious initially tries containment through Dooku. Rather than personally going to Mandalore as he does later in canon, he sends layers of proxies, bounty hunters, separatist assassins, covert droid strikes, and finally specialized forces equipped with weapons intended to overwhelm Force users through volume. None of them solve the problem. Maul can sense assassination attempts before they arrive, and the Sun's inherited perception lets him twist fear inside the attackers. Some flee, some turn on one another, some reach the throne room only to discover they have been walking through a hallucinated corridor while standing motionless in a hangar. He allows one separatist bombardment to damage a Mandalorian fortress, so Sidious believes concentrated orbital fire can overwhelm his defenses. He pretends to require rest after a major telekinetic display. He deliberately lets an assassin escape after seeing him bleed. None of these observations are entirely false. Maul is still an immortal body, and outside Mortis, the Sun's power does not make him literally omnipotent, but he wants Sidious confident enough to come close. The Jedi, meanwhile, face a different moral problem. Maul is attacking separatists, criminal syndicates, and corrupt regimes as often as he attacks Republic forces. Some senators begin asking whether intervention against him is really more urgent than ending the war. Palpatine quietly encourages that confusion when it benefits him, while publicly condemning Maul whenever the Mandalorian regime becomes impossible to ignore. Satine's imprisonment becomes a major political issue. Bo-Katan's resistance pleads for help. Obi-Wan cannot separate the strategic question from the personal one, which is exactly what Maul intended. Anakin pushes for a rescue. Ahsoka supports saving Satine, but fears the trap. This is one of the earliest moments where Ahsoka's Mortis experience makes her more cautious than her master. She knows Maul does not need them dead. If he simply wanted to eliminate Jedi, he could target isolated generals on the front. He wants Anakin and Obi-Wan specifically because their emotions matter to him. Yoda agrees and forbids an unauthorized intervention. Obi-Wan goes anyway. That choice may seem out of character for the Council's most disciplined master, but Maul has spent weeks engineering it. He sends Obi-Wan a message containing Satine alive, surrounded by evidence that her execution is imminent. He includes a detail only someone who touched Kenobi's mind on Mortis could know, a fragment of Qui-Gon's voice. Obi-Wan recognizes the manipulation and still cannot abandon Satine. In canon, he also infiltrates Mandalore to rescue her, despite the political complications, so this remains consistent with the lengths he will go when her life is at stake. The rescue fails more completely than it does in canon. Obi-Wan reaches Satine and briefly frees her, but Maul has allowed every step. The corridors close around them. Mandalorian guards never need to fire. Maul appears carrying the Darksaber and a new crimson weapon shaped by his Mortis power. He tells Satine that Kenobi once believed Maul's story ended on Naboo. Then he tells Obi-Wan that Mortis proved the opposite. Kenobi was only the beginning of his story. In canon, Maul kills Satine with the Darksaber while Obi-Wan watches. Here he almost does the same, but the cruelty has evolved. He gives Obi-Wan a choice: kneel and ask Maul for mercy, or watch Satine die. Obi-Wan understands that submission will not save her permanently, yet Satine urges him not to give Maul what he wants. Maul can feel both of them resisting the emotional script he designed. That frustrates him more than defiance in battle ever could. He kills Satine. The effect on Obi-Wan is devastating, but not in the way Maul hoped. Kenobi breaks for a moment. He screams, reaches for Satine, and feels hatred surge strongly enough that Maul can taste it in the Force. Yet the hatred does not become obedience. Obi-Wan refuses to strike in blind rage. He refuses to tell Maul that the murder has made him powerful. Even psychologically wounded from Mortis, he still chooses grief over vengeance. That failure to corrupt Kenobi becomes an obsession Maul cannot release. Bo-Katan's forces attack during the chaos and manage to extract Obi-Wan, not because they can defeat Maul, but because Maul lets the battle widen while he studies Kenobi's response. Obi-Wan returns to the Jedi with Satine dead and Mandalore lost. The personal consequence is enormous. He becomes quieter, more severe, and more convinced that the Jedi cannot defeat Maul by matching his hatred. Anakin sees only that restraint failed to save Satine. The philosophical gap between them deepens. That gap is exactly what Sidious notices. Even while Maul threatens the grand plan, Palpatine remains Palpatine. He turns every crisis into another angle on Anakin. He tells Skywalker that the Jedi Council's caution allowed a terrorist to murder Duchess Satine. He praises Anakin's instinct to act. He subtly suggests that if the Jedi had trusted his strength on Mortis, Maul might never have escaped. Anakin's guilt and anger intensify, and for a while it appears that Maul's rise may actually help Sidious push the Chosen One toward darkness faster. Then Maul decides to take Anakin away from him. Maul's interest in Anakin is different from the Son's. The Son wanted the Chosen One because Anakin could help him overpower the Father and escape Mortis. Sidious wants Anakin because he sees in him the future of the Sith, and a weapon powerful enough to help destroy the Jedi. Maul wants Anakin because both of those enemies wanted him. Taking Skywalker is therefore the ultimate act of theft. If Maul can break the Chosen One, then he has not merely beaten Sidious and the Father's designs. He has proven that every destiny surrounding him can be dragged into his own. He begins by attacking Anakin's certainty rather than his body. Across several campaigns, Skywalker experiences visions that feel like echoes of Mortis. Padme appears in danger. Obi-Wan appears disappointed in him. Ahsoka appears older, walking away from the Jedi. Some of these images resemble possible futures. Others are deliberate inventions. Anakin cannot tell which are which, and that uncertainty is more corrosive than a clear lie. In canon, the Son shows him the future atrocities of Darth Vader and convinces him, briefly, that joining the dark side might allow him to prevent them. Here, Maul learns the same principle. Anakin can be manipulated most effectively by making control feel like love. Ahsoka is the first person to recognize what is happening, because she experienced the Son's corruption directly. She tells Anakin that the visions are not instructions. Even if some of them are true possibilities, reacting to them in fear gives Maul exactly what he wants. Anakin hears her, but he cannot fully accept the logic. If he sees Padme dying and has the power to prevent it, how can refusing to act be wisdom? That question already exists inside him in canon. Maul simply forces it into the open earlier. Eventually, Maul creates a battlefield designed specifically to isolate Skywalker. He attacks a Republic relief convoy near a system whose civilian population is trapped between separatist forces and his own syndicate blockade. Intelligence indicates that Maul himself may be present. Anakin volunteers before the Council can assign anyone else. Ahsoka goes with him. Obi-Wan is ordered to command the larger fleet because the Council fears repeating Mandalore. The trap closes when Maul separates Anakin from Ahsoka, using a spatial distortion that fractures the battlefield into overlapping visions. Clone troopers see corridors where none exist. Ships report contradictory sensor readings. Anakin finds himself standing in a version of the Mortis monastery, even though he knows he is aboard a station in normal space. Maul waits there. This confrontation reveals the limitation of Maul's new power more clearly than any previous battle. Outside Mortis, he can impose pieces of that realm onto perception and matter, but doing so requires focus. Anakin can disrupt it. The Chosen One is still uniquely dangerous to him because the Father's original test was not an accident. When Anakin centers himself instead of raging, the false monastery flickers. When he reaches through the Force without trying to dominate it, Maul's constructed environment destabilizes. Maul therefore stops trying to overpower him and attacks his heart. He shows Padme dying in childbirth. He shows a black armored figure standing beside Sidious. He shows the Jedi Temple burning. These visions are dangerously close to what the Son showed in canon, because the essence Maul absorbed still carries echoes of that encounter with Anakin's future. But Maul changes the framing. He says Sidious wants these events. He tells Anakin that the man controlling the war has already chosen what Skywalker will become. That accusation is true enough to be devastating. Anakin demands a name. Maul does not give it immediately. He wants Skywalker to beg for knowledge. When Anakin refuses, Maul gives him something better, the sensation of Sidious's presence on Coruscant. Not a face, not proof the Council could present to the Senate, but a direction in the Force. Anakin feels darkness where Palpatine's office should be. For a moment, Maul has done what no one in Sidious's plan expected this early. He has given Anakin reason to suspect the Chancellor. The friendship between Palpatine and Anakin is not instantly erased. Years of trust matter. Anakin's first reaction is denial. Maul is his enemy and a master of visions. But doubt now exists, and doubt is poison to Sidious's carefully timed seduction. Maul could try to force Anakin to kneel, yet doing so would waste the deeper victory. Instead, he allows Ahsoka to reach them. He tells her that her master belongs to men who lie to him, then disappears. Anakin returns to Coruscant carrying a secret he does not know how to test. Palpatine notices the change almost immediately. Anakin is less open, more watchful. When the Chancellor asks about the encounter with Maul, Skywalker gives a restrained account instead of the emotional detail he normally shares. Sidious realizes what Maul has done and makes a decision. The time for observation is over. If Maul remains alive, the Grand Plan will collapse from contamination, even if the Republic continues winning the war. Sidious finally confronts him personally. The location must be secret. Sidious cannot expose himself as a Sith Lord merely to fight a rival. He therefore sends Maul a message through channels only his former apprentice would recognize, invoking codes from Maul's original training. The challenge is simple. Come to Coruscant alone, beneath an abandoned industrial district where surveillance can be controlled, and settle the question of master and apprentice without armies. Maul knows it is a trap and goes anyway. Not because he is reckless, but because this is the confrontation every part of his life has been moving toward. Obi-Wan maimed him, but Sidious made him. Sidious took a child, shaped him into a weapon, taught him that compassion was weakness, sent him to kill, and discarded him when the weapon broke. Everything Maul later does in canon, his obsession with hierarchy, his need for apprentices, his use of fear, his fixation on revenge, carries the imprint of that upbringing. Now he can stand before the source of it with power Sidious never gave him. Palpatine arrives without Dooku. His hood is raised, his lightsabers concealed, and for a moment the scene resembles their later confrontation on Mandalore. Sidious even smiles. He calls Maul an old apprentice and says survival has made him ambitious. The performance is calculated to reduce cosmic transformation to a familiar Sith mistake. A lesser student believing himself ready to overthrow the Master. Maul does not take the bait. He tells Sidious that Mortis showed him what the Sith truly are, not the dark side itself, not destiny, merely men trying to own something older than either of them. Sidious's expression changes at the word Mortis. The duel begins exactly as Sidious wants. He moves with the overwhelming speed that later lets him kill multiple Jedi Masters in seconds, and that canonically overwhelms Maul and Savage together on Mandalore. Twin crimson blades ignite. Force lightning turns the industrial chamber white. Maul initially fights with the darksaber and a crimson weapon of his own, allowing the contest to resemble Sith against Sith. Sidious is better. That needs to remain true for the duel to feel like Star Wars, rather than simple power scaling. Sidious has decades of mastery, extraordinary speed, and an understanding of Sith combat Maul never reached. Blade to blade, he manipulates Maul's old habits, strikes at his mechanical lower body, and uses feints from their training together. For several exchanges, Maul is forced backward. Sidious laughs because he recognizes the child beneath the new power. Then Maul stops fighting like a Sith. The floor disappears beneath Sidious. The walls stretch into black towers. Gravity reverses. The chamber becomes, for a few seconds, a fragment of Mortis layered over Coruscant. Sidious hurls lightning, but the storm bends into the sky Maul has created. He attacks Maul's mind and finds the sun's inherited darkness looking back. He tries to dominate through fear and discovers that fear was burned out of Maul long ago, replaced by hatred. Sidious adapts. He understands that Maul's control over the environment requires concentration, so he attacks with multiple layers at once. Telekinesis, lightning, blades, psychic pressure. Maul's illusion fractures. Coruscant returns. Sidious closes distance and drives a blade through Maul's side. For a heartbeat, the old hierarchy seems restored. Maul looks down at the wound and remembers Naboo. He remembers being cut in half, falling, surviving. The pain does not weaken his connection to the dark side. It is the connection. The sun's essence surges through a body that has already learned to turn agony into life, and the wound closes around Sidious's blade. Palpatine finally stops smiling. Maul catches his wrist and releases the full weight of the stolen power. The chamber implodes outward without exploding. Machinery folds. Durasteel peels from supports. Sidious is thrown through levels of the structure and catches himself with the Force, only for Maul to appear beside him before he lands. Lightning erupts between them, Sidious's blue-white current against a red-black storm drawn from Mortis. The energy spreads into Coruscant's power grid and causes failures across entire districts. Dooku feels the battle from another system. Yoda feels it from the temple. Anakin feels both presences and realizes with sick certainty that one of them is centered near the Chancellor. The Jedi mobilize, but they are too late. Sidious makes one final attempt to turn Maul's psychology against him. He tells him that everything he has become still comes from Sith training. Even this rebellion against the Master follows the rule of two. Maul can kill him, but in doing so, he proves that Sidious successfully made him what he is. The words hurt because they are partly true. For years, Maul's identity has been defined by reactions to other people. Sidious trained him, Obi-Wan broke him, Talzin restored him, Savage follows him. Cosmic power has not automatically produced freedom, but Maul's answer is not philosophical liberation. It is murder. He crushes Sidious against the ruins and drives the Mortis-shaped darkness through him until Palpatine's presence in the Force disappears. Darth Sidious dies years before the Battle of Coruscant. The galaxy does not know it. When Jedi security teams reach the damaged district, they find no Sith battle. They find evidence of an industrial catastrophe, and the Chancellor's security detail reporting that Palpatine is safe elsewhere. Anakin rushes to Palpatine's office and sees the familiar man waiting for him. But something is wrong. The face is right, the voice is right, the concern for Anakin sounds right. Yet Skywalker has spent years around Palpatine. Relationships create details no impersonation can reproduce perfectly. The Chancellor stands half a step differently. His smile arrives too late. Most importantly, the dark presence Anakin sensed during the duel is now here, but it feels more like Maul than the shadow he associated with Sidious. Anakin says nothing. That caution saves his life. Maul, wearing Palpatine's face, tells him that the attack was caused by Maul, and that the Jedi must prepare for a wider offensive. He studies Anakin for signs of recognition. Anakin gives him none. Then Skywalker leaves and goes directly to Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. This creates the most dangerous investigative thread in the Republic. The three people who survived Mortis now suspect that Maul has somehow replaced the Chancellor, but they cannot simply arrest Palpatine. If they are wrong, accusing the head of the Republic during wartime could destroy the Jedi politically. If they are right, the being controlling the Senate may be capable of rewriting perception and overpowering Sidious. Yoda believes them more readily than Mace Windu expects. He felt Sidious's presence vanish during the disturbance. He does not yet know that the vanished presence belonged to Palpatine, but he senses that the structure of the dark side around the war has changed. Where there was once concealment, there is now pressure. The shroud clouding the Jedi remains, but it is turbulent rather than calculated. Maul's first challenge as false Chancellor is Count Dooku. Dooku expects a transmission from his master, and immediately senses something different behind Palpatine's image. Maul drops the disguise. Dooku's reaction is a mixture of fury and opportunity. Sidious is dead. Under Sith logic, that should make Dooku the surviving master. Yet Maul is not asking permission. He gives Dooku a choice: continue commanding the Confederacy under Maul's direction, or die. Dooku refuses, at least initially. He is proud, aristocratic, and immensely powerful. He did not leave the Jedi Order to become subordinate to the apprentice Sidious discarded before taking him. He attacks through a carefully arranged meeting on Sereno, believing his mastery and home defenses give him an advantage. Maul defeats him without killing him. That is more humiliating than death. Dooku's lightning is absorbed. His Makashi precision becomes useless when Maul changes distance and terrain around them. Maul pins him beneath the ruins of his own palace, and tells him that the rule of two ended with Sidious. Dooku can serve as Count of Sereno and leader of the Confederacy, or he can become the first sacrifice of the New Order. Dooku chooses survival. General Grievous notices almost nothing at first. Orders still come through Dooku. Separatist campaigns continue. Republic fleets continue receiving instructions from the Chancellor. From the perspective of most citizens, the Clone Wars proceeds. That continuity is Maul's greatest strategic victory, but his goal is different. Sidious wants the Clone Wars to culminate in a legitimate transformation of the Republic into an empire with himself accepted as Emperor. Maul cares far less about legitimacy. He wants the Jedi broken, Obi-Wan spiritually destroyed, Anakin claimed or ruined, and the galaxy arranged so no master can ever place him beneath another being again. The political machinery is useful only because it gives his hatred scale. This is where Order 66 enters the story far earlier. The inhibitor chips already exist. They were implanted in the clones as part of the conspiracy surrounding the army's creation, and Sidious and Dooku are connected to that conspiracy. Maul does not need to invent the mechanism. Once he takes Sidious's place and compels Dooku's cooperation, he gains access to records, command protocols, Kaminoan contacts, and the hidden architecture behind the contingency order. He learns what Sidious intended. At the chosen moment, the clones would identify the Jedi as enemies and execute them. Maul admires the cruelty of it, yet Maul changes the timing and purpose. Sidious intended Order 66 as the decisive move after the Republic had been politically prepared, Anakin had fallen, and the war could be ended in a controlled sequence. Maul wants the Purge to feel like an offering to darkness. He becomes convinced that every Jedi death strengthens the wound he brought from Mortis. Whether that is metaphysically true or merely what the sun's essence encourages him to believe, almost stops mattering. Maul acts as if extermination itself is fuel. The Jedi investigation accelerates just as Maul prepares the command. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka uncover inconsistencies in Palpatine's schedule surrounding the industrial disaster. R2-D2 helps Anakin compare secure logs. Ahsoka notices that the Chancellor suddenly knows details about Mortis that the Jedi never shared outside the Council. Obi-Wan recognizes a phrase Palpatine uses, an old Sith formulation Maul once repeated to him. They take their findings to Mace Windu. This time the Council does not send 4 Masters to arrest a Sith Lord they believe is merely Palpatine. They know they may be facing something vastly more powerful. Yoda wants to confront him spiritually as well as physically. Mace wants the Senate secured. Obi-Wan insists on being present because Maul has made the conflict personal, whether the Council likes it or not. Anakin demands to come because the man wearing Palpatine's face has manipulated his entire life. Maul expects them. The arrest attempt becomes the event that replaces the final crisis of Revenge of the Sith. When the Jedi enter the Chancellor's office, Palpatine's face melts away and Maul stands before them. He no longer bothers pretending. Behind him, Coruscant's skyline darkens as the Mortis distortion spreads through the upper atmosphere. Mace Windu tells him he is under arrest in the name of the Galactic Senate. Maul laughs, not because the words are foolish, but because they reveal how completely the Jedi still think institutions can contain what is happening. The battle that follows cannot be won by ordinary lightsaber skill. Mace Windu is one of the Order's greatest warriors. Yoda is ancient, agile, and deeply attuned to the Force. Obi-Wan is among the greatest defensive duelists alive. Anakin is the chosen one. Ahsoka is less experienced but uniquely familiar with the Sun's corruption. Together, they represent perhaps the strongest group the Jedi could field. For the first time since Mortis, Maul is genuinely threatened. Mace's ability to confront darkness without simply surrendering to it allows him to keep pressure on Maul. Yoda attacks the currents around Maul rather than the body alone. Obi-Wan refuses every emotional provocation. Ahsoka recognizes when visions are trying to separate them. And Anakin, when he remains centered, can still force the Mortis power backward. Maul realizes the Jedi might actually contain him if they remain united, so he does what Sidious would do. He divides them through Anakin. The room changes. Padme appears before Skywalker, dying. The image is more convincing than anything he has seen before. Maul tells him the Jedi are preventing him from accessing the power that could save her. He tells Anakin that Sidious planned to manipulate this same fear, but that Maul is offering truth. With the Sun's power, death itself can be challenged. After all, the daughter restored Ahsoka on Mortis. Life can be transferred. Futures can be seen. Why should Padme be allowed to die, merely because Jedi doctrine says Anakin must let go? Anakin hesitates. That hesitation is enough. Maul hurls Mace through the transparasteel window, but does not immediately kill him. He traps Yoda beneath a crushing wave of Force energy. He locks Ahsoka inside a vision of her own corruption. Obi-Wan reaches Anakin and tells him the promise is the same trap in a different voice. Anakin looks at Maul, and for the first time, sees the pattern clearly. The Sun offered power to prevent a terrible future. Sidious has spent years encouraging his fear of loss. Now Maul is offering the same thing again. Different masters, same chain. He refuses. This is the point where our alternate timeline gives Anakin a chance canon, never gives him in exactly this form. Because Maul exposed Sidious too early, because Ahsoka survived Mortis and can speak from experience, and because Obi-Wan has already lost Satine without turning, Anakin is surrounded by evidence that fear-based control is the road into darkness. He does not become Darth Vader here, at least not willingly. Maul takes that refusal personally. He wanted to steal Sidious's chosen apprentice. Instead, Anakin rejects the idea of having any Dark Master. Maul stops trying to persuade him and attacks with enough force to drive Skywalker through the office floor. Then he issues Order 66. The command moves through secure military channels, while the Jedi leadership is still fighting on Coruscant. Across the galaxy, clone commanders receive the order identifying Jedi as traitors. The inhibitor chips activate. Soldiers who have fought beside Jedi for years turn their weapons on them. The purge begins earlier than Sidious intended, but it is still devastating. The timing makes this version of Order 66 uniquely horrific. The Five's conspiracy has not happened yet, so the Jedi have not even received the brief warning that something about the clones' behavior might be tied to implanted control chips. Rex has never heard Fives desperately trying to explain that the Chancellor is involved. Ahsoka has never left the Order, never returned for the Siege of Mandalore, and never learned how to remove Rex's chip. To almost every clone in the Grand Army, the command arrives without context and overrides years of loyalty in an instant. Rex turns on Ahsoka inside the Chancellor's complex. Cody turns on Obi-Wan when the Jedi attempt to escape Coruscant. Elsewhere, commanders fire on their generals in the middle of campaigns that were never designed to become execution grounds. Some Jedi survive because the deployment pattern is less ideal than the one Sidious eventually uses at the end of the war. Others survive because the sudden order comes while they are inside heavily defended bases rather than exposed on distant fronts. But many die for the same reason they die in canon. The soldiers beside them are trusted, numerous, and already inside their defenses. Maul has no interest in pretending the Purge is a tragic military necessity for very long. That is another major difference from Sidious. Palpatine uses the supposed Jedi rebellion to justify emergency powers and frame the Empire as the legal successor to the Republic. Maul initially keeps the Palpatine disguise because it lets the command structure function, but once the Jedi Temple is under attack and clone forces control the Senate District, the mask stops serving him. He reveals himself to the galaxy. The broadcast begins with Chancellor Palpatine addressing the Senate. Halfway through the speech, the familiar face changes. The warm, elderly politician disappears, and Maul stands in his place, crowned by black red force energy and holding the darksaber. He tells the galaxy that the Republic and Confederacy were both lies created by Sith masters who believed themselves entitled to rule from hiding. He announces that Darth Sidious is dead, that Count Dooku has submitted, and that the age of hidden rulers is over. For the Senate, the revelation is incomprehensible. Many assume it is a separatist transmission or some form of sabotage. Then clone troops seal the chamber. Maul does not proclaim himself emperor in Sidious's style. The title is too closely associated with a political tradition he considers weak. Different worlds begin using different names because no official label can fully describe what he is trying to build. Lord of Mandalore, Dark Sovereign, Mandalore to those Death Watch warriors willing to accept him, Sith usurper to surviving Jedi, and eventually simply Maul to citizens who learn that the name itself can get them killed. His formal government becomes a militarized mandate created from Republic Emergency Authority, Mandalorian occupation structures, and criminal enforcement networks. Coruscant remains the administrative center because the bureaucracy is too valuable to discard. Mandalore becomes the ideological and military capital. Maul turns the planet into proof that an outsider can take a proud culture, defeat its strongest warriors according to their own traditions, and reshape the results around himself. Shipyards expand. Beskar armored commandos become elite enforcers. Crime syndicate wealth flows into military production. Republic facilities continue manufacturing clone material while separatist factories are seized rather than shut down. This means the Clone Wars does not end cleanly. It mutates. Dooku obeys Maul only as long as he believes rebellion is impossible. The moment Order 66 begins and Sidious's political structure collapses into open terror, Dooku sees his chance. He contacts separatist leaders and tells them that the Republic has been captured by an external dark side tyrant. For once, that claim is almost entirely true. Several separatist worlds rally around him, not because they suddenly trust Dooku, but because Maul is visibly worse than the government they were already fighting. Maul expected the betrayal. He attacks Sereno personally and kills Dooku in front of the Count's surviving commanders. There is no elaborate duel this time. Dooku already knows he cannot win. Maul lifts him from the ground, forces him to kneel, and ends the line of Darth Tyrannus as casually as Sidious intended Anakin to do years later. General Grievous reacts with more pragmatism. He hates Jedi, respects overwhelming force, and has no deep loyalty to Sith philosophy. Maul offers him exactly what he wants, an endless war against surviving Jedi and any separatist worlds that refuse submission. Grievous becomes one of the new regime's most terrifying military commanders, leading droid armies that now fight beside clone formations under a ruler who has inherited both arsenals. The clones themselves become a tragedy on a scale even larger than canon. Because the chips remain active and the purge comes early, soldiers like Rex spend more of their shortened lives inside Maul's regime. Some clones eventually resist as the chip's immediate compulsion fades and their individual personalities reassert themselves, but they begin with no Ahsoka-assisted revelation, no Fives warning, and no organized network explaining what happened to them. Rex may eventually sense that something is wrong, because canon repeatedly shows his strong individuality and moral judgment, but understanding the crime is much harder without evidence. Ahsoka survives the first hours of Order 66 only because she has already lived through a version of darkside possession on Mortis. When Rex raises his blasters against her, the emotional shock is enormous, but she recognizes the sensation behind his eyes, someone else's will pressing through a person she trusts. She refuses to kill him if she can avoid it. Unlike her later canon escape aboard the Tribunal, however, she has no knowledge of inhibitor chips and no recording from Fives to guide her. She can only flee. Yoda helps create an opening. The Grand Master survives the Chancellor's office confrontation and senses the clone betrayal quickly enough to avoid the first wave. He and Ahsoka escape the central complex through old temple passages, while Mace Windu's fate becomes uncertain in the chaos. Some masters die. Others disappear into Coruscant's lower levels. The temple burns, but not under Darth Vader's command. Anakin is not among the escaping Jedi. Maul specifically orders the clones not to execute Skywalker. The command requires additional clarification because Anakin is technically a Jedi and therefore subject to Order 66, but Maul now controls the highest command channels. Clone units surround Anakin after the battle and stun him repeatedly until even the Chosen One is overwhelmed. He wakes beneath Mandalore in a chamber designed with both technology and Mortis energy, isolated from the Force in ways he has never experienced. Maul visits him without guards. This is the confrontation that determines whether Anakin's prophecy is truly broken. Maul tells him Sidious is dead and the Jedi are dying. He tells him the Republic never deserved his loyalty, the Council never trusted him, and the Sith Master who called himself his friend intended to turn his fear of losing Padme into a chain. All of that contains truth. Then Maul makes the same mistake every would-be master of Anakin eventually makes. He assumes exposing one set of chains will make Anakin accept another. Anakin refuses to kneel. Maul responds by taking away the things Anakin would fight to protect. Padme is placed under surveillance. Ahsoka is declared one of the galaxy's most wanted fugitives. Obi-Wan's capture becomes a standing priority. Every time Anakin resists, Maul shows him another city punished, another Jedi hunted, another vision of someone he loves suffering. The goal is not persuasion anymore. It is learned helplessness. For weeks, Anakin attempts escape. Each attempt comes closer than Maul expects. This is the Chosen One, and even diminished by the prison, he remains capable of extraordinary feats. On one attempt, he nearly reaches a hangar before Maul appears and drives him to the ground without touching him. On another, he manages to wound Savage, who has become Maul's chief enforcer. Every failure makes Maul more determined to break him rather than kill him. Eventually, Maul forces Anakin to witness a massacre of captured Jedi prisoners. He offers a choice: serve and save the next group, or refuse and watch them die. Anakin knows service will only create more victims later. He also cannot stand by while people die in front of him. This is the exact moral weakness Sidious exploits in a different form: Anakin's inability to accept loss when immediate power appears capable of preventing it. He agrees to one mission. That is all Maul needs. The first compromise is framed as temporary. Anakin tells himself he is saving lives until he can find a way to turn on Maul. The second compromise is easier because he has already crossed the line. Maul never gives him the name Darth Vader. That identity belonged to Sidious's imagined future. Instead, Anakin becomes a captive weapon whose status is deliberately ambiguous. To the regime, he is proof that even the Jedi's Chosen One serves Maul. To Anakin himself, he remains a prisoner waiting for an opening. This is darker in a different way than his canon fall. Darth Vader chooses Sidious in a moment of terror and then commits himself to increasingly monstrous acts after believing Padme is lost. Here, Anakin never emotionally accepts Maul as his master, but he is beaten into obedience through hostage-taking, visions, and impossible power. His remaining goodness survives longer, yet it produces less immediate freedom. Maul has turned the Chosen One into a living trophy. Obi-Wan learns this through underground reports and takes it harder than almost anything else. Satine is dead, the Order is shattered, and Anakin is being displayed as Maul's servant. The visions Maul forced on him at Mortis return with new force. Every disaster seems to confirm the accusation that Kenobi's survival only creates more suffering. Ahsoka refuses to let him believe it. This becomes one of the most important reversals in the timeline. In canon, Obi-Wan is often the emotional anchor for Anakin and Ahsoka. Now Ahsoka has to anchor Obi-Wan. She reminds him that Maul's entire strategy depends on making people interpret survival as guilt. If Obi-Wan gives up because others suffered, then Maul does not need to kill him. He has already won. Yoda reaches the same conclusion on a larger scale. The surviving Jedi cannot restore the Republic through conventional military rebellion because Maul now controls clone forces, large portions of the droid army, Mandalore, and the underworld. Nor can they simply wait for political opposition to remove him. His supernatural power allows him to terrorize leaders who might have resisted Sidious through institutions. The only path runs back through Mortis. Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Yoda begin searching for the monolith. They do not know whether Mortis can be entered again, but they know the daughter remains there. If she is still alive, then the imbalance has not become absolute. The daughter may be able to explain how the son's essence can be separated from Maul, or how Anakin can fulfill the role the father once offered him. Maul senses the search and accelerates his consolidation. The Senate is dissolved far earlier than Sidious would have dared. Regional governors receive direct military authority. Mandalorian super commandos are stationed alongside clone units on major worlds. Criminal organizations are no longer partners. They are ministries of smuggling, surveillance, and coercion. Hutts who resist vanish. Pike leadership is replaced when necessary. Black Sun becomes an intelligence arm. The economic consequences are disastrous. Sidious's empire is brutal but obsessed with control, industrial output, taxation, and centralized administration. Maul's regime treats fear as both policy and purpose. Systems are punished collectively for resistance. Trade routes are redirected toward loyal worlds. Whole sectors begin operating through black markets that are paradoxically controlled by the same syndicates serving the state. Mandalore becomes richer and more powerful in the short term while becoming spiritually hollow. Warriors who joined Maul because he won the Darksaber discover that victory has not restored the culture they imagined. Their armor now represents service to an outsider whose power makes traditional martial honor almost meaningless. Bo-Katan's rebellion grows, drawing Mandalorians who once supported Death Watch but cannot accept what their revolution created. Savage remains loyal longer than almost anyone. Unlike Sidious, Maul treats him as family, but the relationship is still poisoned by hierarchy. Savage watches his brother become less recognizably mortal with every major use of the sun's power. Maul stops sleeping regularly. His voice occasionally overlaps with another tone. Shadows move around him before he decides to move them. The cosmic decay is beginning. At first, the effects are subtle enough to be dismissed as war damage. Force-sensitive children report identical nightmares on worlds that have never communicated. Jedi survivors find meditation almost impossible because visions of anger intrude. Sith ruins awaken. Places strong in the dark side become more active, while places associated with healing feel distant and difficult to reach. Then physical phenomena follow. Hyperspace routes near major darkside nexuses become unstable. Ships emerge hours or days from expected positions. On some worlds, ecosystems enter unnatural cycles of growth and decay. Animals become aggressive without environmental cause. Storms gather around battlefields even after fighting ends. People with no force training begin seeing dead relatives or feared futures in dreams. Maul initially interprets these events as proof that his reign is transforming the galaxy in his image. Talzin sees something far worse. She warns him that the power of Mortis is not obeying him. It is leaking through him. The sun was part of a balanced system. Maul ripped that part free, and every time he uses it as a weapon, he widens the connection between ordinary reality and the collapsing realm he left behind. Maul rejects the warning. This is the fundamental reason his empire becomes more dangerous than Sidious's. Sidious wants immortality and absolute control. He may destroy planets and enslave civilizations, but destruction is a means toward a stable hierarchy with himself at the top. Maul's deepest emotional engine is different. He survived by hatred. Pain proves existence to him. If the galaxy hurts, then in some twisted sense, the galaxy finally resembles the world he has always lived inside. So when reality begins to decay, he does not retreat from the power. He uses more of it. The daughter weakens on Mortis with every surge. Ahsoka begins seeing her in dreams, not as a clear apparition, but as flashes of white wings trapped beneath black stone. The connection is likely possible because the daughter once restored Ahsoka from the sun's corruption. That event tied their lives together in canonically significant ways, even if the exact metaphysics remain mysterious. In this timeline, the bond becomes a beacon. Ahsoka leads Obi-Wan and Yoda toward the Krillithium system. Bo-Katan provides ships. Surviving Jedi provide navigation data. The Resistance is small, fragmented, and hunted, but for the first time since the Purge, it has a goal more meaningful than survival. Maul sends Anakin to stop them. The choice is deliberate cruelty. He wants Obi-Wan and Ahsoka to see what he has done to their family. Anakin arrives at the head of a combined clone Mandalorian force, wearing dark armor, but not the life support suit of Darth Vader. His face is still his own. His lightsaber is still blue. Ahsoka refuses to fight him as an enemy. Anakin tells her to leave before Maul comes personally. Obi-Wan realizes that the warning means Anakin is still resisting. The three argue while fleets exchange fire around them, and for a moment the old relationship is visible beneath everything Maul has done. Then Maul arrives. He feels the daughter calling from Mortis and understands their plan. He also understands that Anakin's refusal to fully break has become dangerous. The Chosen One is standing beside the two people most capable of reminding him who he is. Maul attacks all three. The battle is less a duel than a natural disaster. Ships lose power. The monolith appears from empty space. Mortis energy spreads across the system. Yoda reaches through the Force, and, with Ahsoka's connection to the daughter, opens the path. Anakin makes his choice. Instead of obeying Maul, he turns and pours everything he has into holding the Dark Sovereign back, while Obi-Wan and Ahsoka enter the monolith. It is the first free decision he has made in months, and because it is based on sacrifice rather than fear, Maul cannot feed on it as easily. For several seconds, Anakin forces him backward. The father was right. The Chosen One remains the one mortal uniquely capable of controlling the extremes of Mortis. Maul has stolen the sun's essence, killed Sidious, conquered governments, and broken armies, but he has not erased what Anakin is. The prophecy has been delayed and distorted, not automatically destroyed. That realization terrifies Maul more than any Jedi army. He overwhelms Anakin through sheer accumulated power and hurls him into the opening after Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. Then Maul follows. Mortis is almost unrecognizable. The lush cycles of life and death have collapsed into a permanent twilight. The father's monastery is broken. The daughter remains bound beneath the ruins, her light so weak that Ahsoka can barely sense it. Obi-Wan frees her while Anakin confronts Maul one final time. The daughter tells Ahsoka that Maul cannot permanently own the sun's place. A mortal consciousness is trying to contain a cosmic principle through hatred, and both are being corrupted by the attempt. The only true solution is separation. If Anakin accepts the role he refused when the father first asked him, if only for a moment, he may be able to command the dark essence out of Maul and restore it to the balance of the Force. But there is a cost. Anakin would have to stop trying to control what happens afterward. He cannot do it to save Padme, guarantee Ahsoka's future, preserve Obi-Wan, or secure his own life. He has to act without demanding that the Force reward him with the outcome he wants. That is the exact lesson Anakin has failed throughout his life. Maul knows it too. He fills Mortis with images of Padme dying and tells Anakin that surrendering control means choosing her death. He offers the power again. With the son's essence and the daughter weakened, Maul claims they could command life and death together. Anakin only has to stop resisting. For a moment, the entire alternate timeline hangs on the same weakness that creates Darth Vader in canon. Anakin looks at Ahsoka. He looks at Obi-Wan. He remembers every master who tried to turn love into possession. Then he lets go. The act does not mean he stops loving Padme. It means he finally accepts that love cannot give him ownership of her fate. He reaches into the Force not as a Sith, not as a general, and not as a man trying to become powerful enough to prevent every loss. For one moment, he becomes what the father believed he could be. Maul screams as the sun's essence begins tearing free. This is the one outcome Maul never imagined, because it cannot be defeated through greater hatred. The power that made him a god responds to the Chosen One's authority on Mortis. Shadows peel away from his body. His impossible armor collapses. His mechanical legs reappear beneath him in a form closer to the ruined creature from Lotho Minor. But Maul refuses to release it completely. His entire life has been refusal. Refusal to die, refusal to be forgotten, refusal to accept Sidious's abandonment, refusal to accept Kenobi's victory. He clings to the sun's essence with the same hatred that kept him alive after Naboo. Mortis begins to tear apart. The daughter tells Anakin that if Maul will not release the power, both vessel and realm may have to die together. Obi-Wan reaches for Maul one last time, not with anger, but with compassion. That infuriates Maul more than hatred ever could. He cannot accept pity from Kenobi. He cannot accept a universe in which the man he dedicated his life to destroying can look at him and see tragedy rather than supremacy. Maul chooses the darkness. He pulls the sun's essence back into himself and tears open the path to the galaxy before Anakin can finish the separation. The resulting shockwave throws everyone from Mortis, and this is where the nightmare ending becomes the most likely outcome. Anakin has proven that Maul can be stopped, but he has not stopped him. The daughter survives, and the Chosen One has finally understood the role he must play, which means hope still exists. Yet Maul now knows exactly what threatens him. He returns to the galaxy determined never to allow Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Yoda, or the daughter to align again. The Dark Mandate becomes even more brutal. Force-sensitive children are seized not merely to prevent future Jedi, but to prevent anyone from becoming another possible vessel of balance. Ancient temples are destroyed or occupied. Hyperspace lanes around Mortis are blockaded. Mandalore becomes a fortress surrounding the ruler's personal cult. Anakin escapes with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka during the chaos, denying Maul his greatest trophy, but the galaxy they return to is already transformed. The Jedi Order is shattered years early. Sidious and Dooku are dead. Grievous commands armies for Maul. Rex and countless clones remain trapped in a regime created through their own stolen obedience. Satine is dead. Mandalore is occupied by the very revolution that claimed it would restore Mandalorian freedom, and the Republic exists only as bureaucratic machinery beneath a dark sovereign. Most importantly, the Force itself is wounded. That is the final difference between Maul's victory and Sidious's. Sidious creates an empire that dominates the galaxy politically, while the light survives in hidden individuals, eventually gathering around Luke Skywalker. Maul's reign attacks the spiritual environment those individuals would need in order to grow. Meditation becomes harder. Visions become less reliable. Fear spreads through places untouched by soldiers. The dark side is not merely ascendant, because evil people control institutions. The wound at Mortis is continuously feeding instability into the Force. The galaxy does not end in a single explosion, it withers. Worlds continue orbiting their suns. People still work, trade, raise families, resist, and hope. That ordinary persistence is important because Star Wars never treats darkness as the literal erasure of every good thing. But the atmosphere of the age changes. Every act of fear has more weight. Every violent choice seems easier. Every attempt to see a better future becomes clouded. Maul sits at the center of that age and discovers the cruelest truth of his ascension. Nothing has healed him. He killed Sidious and still remembers being abandoned. He broke the Jedi and still remembers Naboo. He conquered Mandalore and still hates Obi-Wan. He took the sun's power and still feels powerless whenever Anakin resists him. Cosmic strength has magnified the wound without filling it. That is why the end state cannot become stable. Maul believed enough power would finally make his suffering mean something. Instead, he has projected that suffering across the galaxy. And that brings us to the heart of this entire alternate timeline. If Maul killed the sun and absorbed his power on Mortis, the most important change would not be that he could throw larger objects with the Force, or defeat more Jedi in a duel. It would be that one of the most wounded characters in the Clone Wars suddenly gained access to power designed to exist only inside a cosmic balance. Maul's hatred would stop being personal and become structural. Sidious would almost certainly become his greatest immediate target, and with the sun's essence behind him, the confrontation that canonically ends with Maul begging for mercy could reverse completely. The Republic and Separatists would become inherited tools. Order 66 could still happen because the machinery already exists, but it would be triggered earlier, more chaotically, and for a ruler who values terror over Sidious's carefully engineered legitimacy. Mandalore would become less a prize in a criminal strategy and more the warrior capital of a supernatural dictatorship. Anakin would remain the crucial uncertainty. Mortis canon establishes that the father believes he is capable of controlling both son and daughter, and no alternate scenario should simply forget that, because Maul has become powerful. If anyone can ultimately separate the sun's essence from Maul and restore balance, it is still the Chosen One. But Maul's entire regime would be built around preventing Anakin from making that choice freely. That means the prophecy is not erased, it is trapped. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan become essential because they are the relationships most capable of reminding Anakin that power is not the same as love. Yoda becomes essential because he can recognize that defeating Maul is not primarily a military problem. The daughter becomes the surviving anchor on Mortis. Bo-Katan becomes the center of a Mandalorian resistance, fighting a ruler who turned her people's warrior traditions against them. Hope still exists, but it exists under conditions far worse than the Empire we know. And Maul, for all his victory, becomes the greatest prisoner of all. He escaped Lotho Minor, escaped Sidious, escaped death, escaped Mortis, and escaped every hierarchy that ever controlled him. Yet by taking the sun's power, he chains himself to the one thing he can never outrun, his own hatred. The result is a galaxy caught inside that hatred with him. Thanks for watching. If there are any other Clone Wars what-if scenarios, characters, battles, or pieces of lore you want to see explored in a future video, leave your ideas in the comments below. Until the next video.